With the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to replace retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy, the president has created perhaps the most conservative Supreme Court. How does this affect key business issues, though, including antitrust and financial regulation? Joining us this morning, Director of Washington Research at KBW, Brian Gardner, and Evercore's Head of Public Policy Analysis, Terry Haines. Morning, guys. Good to see you both.
Morning, Carl.
Likewise. Good morning.
Guys, the Journal, in this case, takes a look at some high-profile cases, but mostly on abortion, semi-automatic rifles. There is one they mentioned on the ACA. But in general, Brian, how can we define his take, at least in recent years, when it comes to regulation in business?
Yeah, I don't view it as a good for business, bad for business view. He is generally suspect of the administrative state, and I think he wants to restrain it and force Congress to be a little bit more explicit in the laws that it writes. So I think the outcome is probably generally positive for business. But he's also, I think it's a very moderate pick, a modest pick, if you will. When you look at the CFPB case in which he ruled that the CFPB as structured was unconstitutional, he didn't go out and strike down the entire CFPB. He fixed it in a very narrow way, giving the president the power to fire the director. So I think he's generally going to be supported by the business community. I think they're going to like the pick. But I think you have to be very careful in saying this is a really pro-business pick. It just doesn't play out that way.
Really? I mean, Fortune magazine calls him business's best friend and says he's overruled regulators on cases from consumer protections to net neutrality 75 times.
That's fine when it's in terms of when it's. I don't agree with the premise that that's how he gets there or that's the outcome of it. I do think that he is suspect of an administrative state that's gotten a little out of control, that he wants to rein it in and leave it to Congress to figure out what the law should be, not that the administrative agency should be rewriting the laws when they're vaguely written. So I think we're going to see a pullback over time on what's referred to as the Chevron doctrine. And the deferral that the courts give to administrative agencies, I think he actually wants Congress to be more explicit on this. That can actually, in the end, backfire on business if Congress comes in and actually writes laws that are substantially more explicit and more pro-consumer. So I think the inputs are more important to him than the outcomes are.
Terry, where do you come at this from?
My view of this generally is that Judge Kavanaugh is a very well-known quantity in Washington. I think he's very likely to be confirmed. I think that his service on the D.C. Circuit, the last stop before the Supreme Court, and where most of the regulatory decisions are first looked at and approved or disapproved by the courts, show him to be somebody who is interested in making sure that regulators don't get to go out and try to make law on their own. That Congress is there to provide guidance and to provide the limits of their jurisdiction, and that's what regulators ought to be doing. So it's untrue to say he's against regulation on this or that or the other thing. It is true to say that what he wants regulators to do is stay in their own particular lane and not go out and try to create powers that they don't already have. To me, that's incrementally market positive and incrementally pro-business.
Terry, real quickly, we bring you on often, of course, to talk about sort of political strategy and analysis. Will this have any impact, in your opinion, on the midterms, particularly, of course, in terms of what goes on in terms of the congressional vote itself? Or is this a non-entity when it comes to the election?
No, I think it's not a non-entity. I do think it's pretty much a wash, though, because I think what you have here is a situation where, like obviously the opponents of a new Supreme Court justice appointed by President Trump, no matter who that is going to be used in order to fire up the left base. But I think what's unappreciated is that it's also going to be used and also will, to some extent, fire up the right base. So, my view remains the same as it was before, that what you have this fall is you have an increased Republican representation in the Senate, and Republicans probably hang on to the House with a smaller majority than they have today.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.